MacBook Pro 14 with the M1 Pro chip for about 9 months now. I've traveled with it, brought it to cafes, made updates, and much more. Throughout that duration, there are also some quirks that came up that I noticed that I'm not too pleased about. So in today's video, I'm gonna go over the good, the bad, and whether it was worth the investment. Let's get into it. As a quick refresher on the specs, I have the MacBook Pro 14 with the M1 Pro chip. It comes with 8-core CPU and 14-core GPU, 16 GB of RAM, liquid Retina XDR display, up to 1600 nits of peak brightness, and 120 Hz refresh rate with ProMotion. When I traveled to Vancouver, I brought my MacBook Pro 14 and that was the first time traveling with it. I did work at the airport and on the plane. When it comes to carrying this laptop, it weighs about 3.5 pounds, and when I am carrying it in a bag that carries a laptop on top of many other items like my camera equipment, mouse, external hard drives, batteries, over time it can get heavy. But in a short amount of time, it's really no issue. I find that if you're carrying your MacBook Pro on its own or very minimal equipment, it won't get heavy. The MacBook Pro 14 sits perfectly on my lap. While I was at the airport waiting for my plane, I did some work. And I noticed that with the sides, it sat very comfortably on my lap. And also with the weight, it didn't feel like it would fall off because it was very sturdy. So if you're out on the bench or in a park or somewhere where you're doing work on your lap, I find that this is perfect for you because again, it covers enough surface and the weight makes it feel sturdy and like it won't move on you. Since I took Flair Airlines, I found that their seats were quite small and cramped together, and the table was a bit small as well. But luckily, my MacBook Pro 14 sat perfectly on the table. However, if you have external hard drives, wires, or anything connected to the MacBook, you will have to play table Tetris to make sure everything fits perfectly. But once I got settled in, I had no issues editing or watching videos. I continue to say a lot of good things about the display. When it comes to the bezels, I absolutely am happy with the thinner bezels because it makes the screen look bigger than it probably is. And I still can't get over that this is the 14-inch, just 1 more inch bigger than the 13-inch. Not only that, when it comes to editing with Adobe Premiere Pro or After Effects or Photoshop, there are a lot of columns and tabs, and sometimes on a smaller screen or display, it can feel overcrowded, but with the 14-inch, everything is laid out perfectly for me to work efficiently. Overall, taking it with me to cafes or traveling with it, I find that getting work done is just seamless. I have no issues with it. With that said, of course, it's great to type notes and watch videos. In terms of the liquid Retina XDR display, I am still in awe of it. It is magnificent to watch movies, videos on this MacBook Pro because the colors are extremely vibrant with a billion colors. Everything's so crisp and clear and moves so smoothly. When I showed it to my sister, one of them said it felt like watching a 4K TV, and my other sister was in awe of it and was so tempted to buy it just because how great it is to watch videos on this MacBook. In terms of brightness, this MacBook has 1000 nits of brightness and up to 1600 of peak brightness. If you have direct sunlight, you can still see really well whether you're in light mode or dark mode. I found with the previous MacBook Air M1, it only had 400 nits brightness and it wasn't enough to combat direct sunlight. It was ideal to have shade or not be in direct sunlight. But with the MacBook Pro 14, it definitely is enough to work outside comfortably without struggling. When Apple released the MacBook Pro 14, they advertised that it can last up to 17 hours of battery with video playback. I'm not gonna go into that too much, and I'm just gonna believe them on that because I didn't feel like I wanted to test that and watch 17 hours of videos. However, I did spend a day with my MacBook Pro, no editing, just web browsing, taking notes, watching videos, and I found that it lasted about 10.5 hours, which is pretty accurate to what Apple says. They advertised that it would last about 11 hours with web browsing and watching videos. Now, as a content creator, I do edit using Adobe Premiere Pro, After Effects, Photoshop on top of web browsing and watching videos. With that type of usage, my battery will last about 6 to 7 hours. Compared to the MacBook Air M1, I found that battery lasted longer when it comes to web browsing or casually going on YouTube and casually editing, because with the M1 chip, it doesn't use as much energy as the M1 Pro chip. A lot of the times when I'm editing, it's connected to my monitor, and that's when it will only last 4 hours. Overall, in terms of battery, I would say the MacBook Air would outlast my MacBook Pro for about a couple hours. Alright, let's get into some of the quirks and issues I have with the MacBook Pro 14. First is the speakers. In the beginning, I absolutely loved my speakers. It was louder than my kitchen fan. The quality was amazing. The MacBook Pro comes with 6 speakers and a surround sound. So watching movies, editing with the speakers was a pleasant experience. However, in the past couple of months, I noticed a crackling noise in the speakers whenever I watch videos, edit, or listen to music. Right now, my audio is set to come out of both sides of the speakers. So here you see the balance, it's set in the middle. And so that means it's gonna come out in the right and left speakers. To Vancouver. While I'm waiting, I'm just editing a video I've been working on. Is the iPhone 6s Plus still good in 2022? So as you can tell, my speakers have this crackling, buzzing noise. And so what I do to temporarily fix it is move this over here because it's coming out of my right speaker, not my left. And so let's go back to this and... And it's a negative experience when I'm using my MacBook. It's really tedious to hear in the background, and sometimes it affects the clarity of the audio. I looked into this, and a lot of people are saying that it's a system error versus a hardware issue. So hopefully Apple fixes this soon. What I plan to do is to go into Apple and ask the support team to take a look at my MacBook to hopefully get it fixed, because again, it negatively affects my experience watching videos and movies and editing. The other issue I have with MacBooks in general, and this is an issue that's been happening for a while, is that when 3 devices are connected to MacBooks, one of them or all of them starts to glitch and not work properly. This is really tedious when I'm connecting it to my monitor and I have my Bluetooth earphones in, my Bluetooth mouse and keys. Once they're all connected, the mouse starts to glitch and not work smoothly. As mighty as the M1 Pro chip is, there is a downside to it that I've mentioned in the past, and that's with programs or softwares not adapted to the M1 Pro chip. For example, with my LG monitor, there is a software I can download to customize the brightness of my monitor, to customize the coloring, etc. And with that program, it was configurable with the Windows or Intel-based MacBooks. But it's not adapted to the M1 Pro chip, so I can't use that software to customize my LG monitor. Another example is I've downloaded templates to use in Adobe Premiere Pro and After Effects, but they are more suited for Windows-based laptops. When I put it on my MacBook Pro, it had to convert to the Mac OS system, and it wasn't working really well. It glitched, it was extremely slow, and when I navigated through it, it was not seamless at all. What would take about 30 minutes to customize on my Windows work laptop, it would take about an hour to an hour and a half to customize on my MacBook. A lot of smaller softwares or programs might not or ever will adapt to the M1 Pro chip. You might have to wait a longer period of time when the M1 chips have been around a lot longer, whereas larger popular programs or softwares will be adapted to the M1 Pro chip. This laptop was about 2,500 Canadian dollars. Although that can sound pretty hefty, it definitely was worth the investment for me because I was upgrading from a 2012 MacBook Air. Aside from the upgrade, everything else that encompasses this laptop was worth the investment, especially when it improves my workflow experience. When you have multiple incentive programs running at the same time, it is really nice to have a seamless experience, not have any hiccups, glitches, or freezes happening, because when you're in that state of workflow, it's so peaceful and you find the process a lot more fun and get more work done. To me, that alone was worth the investment. But in addition to that, the display is absolutely beautiful. It really feels like I'm watching 4K videos, and also the brightness on top of it. If I want to go outside, I can get work done without squinting my eyes or struggling to see. Also, they brought back ports, which was major because for so many years they didn't have ports. And as an editor, you live by your SD cards, and more ports the better. Despite the issues I have with the MacBook Pro, like the speakers and Bluetooth and programs not adapted to the M1 Pro chip, all the positives truly outweigh the negatives, and hopefully the speakers get fixed because that's pretty serious. But overall, I do love my MacBook Pro 14. It has immensely improved my workflow experience, and that truly is what's most important to me, to getting work done, getting the results I want, and making the process a lot more enjoyable. That was my review of my MacBook Pro 14. I hope it helped you out, and if it did, definitely slap that like button for me. I would totally appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed, definitely consider it. I make a lot of tech and lifestyle content. However, that is it for me, and I'll see you in the next one.